Fox's alert, the Republican Senate is set to kick off one of the rarest sights in Washington, a wide-open, freewheeling debate over one of the most difficult and divisive issues facing our nation, immigration reform. President Trump made it clear what he wants to see in any legislation. But there's nearly no telling what 100 members of the Senate will produce. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith, host of Kennedy on Fox Business. Kennedy, former deputy spokesperson for the State Department, and Fox News analyst Marie Harf. And joining us in the center seat, Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis of Florida. He is outnumbered. Hi.
Welcome, Congressman.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, we got a lot going on. I'm glad you're here on a Monday.
We do.
Okay, let's scoop. Front and center in the immigration debate is the fate of dreamers, the hundreds of thousands of immigrants who came here illegally as children. But also on the table, Republican requests for more border security and reforms to U.S. immigration system. Then yesterday, new reports the White House is floating a compromise idea to maintain legal immigration at current levels for more than a decade. Late last night, a group of Republican senators announced a plan that mirrors the president's framework. Any plan to advance it will need 60 votes. That means substantial support from both political parties will be mandatory. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live for us on Capitol Hill. Mike, here we go again. Thunder and lightning.
No doubt about it, Harris. Good afternoon to you. Yeah, President Trump sounds hopeful as the Senate begins a critical week tackling immigration. Today, Republican Senators Grassley, Cornyn, Perdue, Tillis, Lankford, Cotton, and Ernst are going to roll out an immigration plan which looks a lot like what President Trump requested. It would address the young people, fund border security with a wall, end so-called chain migration and the visa lottery. President Trump weighed in on Twitter over the weekend, writing, Republicans want to fix DACA far more than the Democrats do. The Dems had all three branches of government back in 2008 to 2011, and they decided not to do anything about DACA. They only want to use it as a campaign issue. Vote Republican. And in his weekly address, President Trump urged lawmakers to get it done.
It's time for Congress to act and to protect Americans. Every member of Congress should choose the side of law enforcement and the side of the American people. That's the way it has to be.
A leading House conservative says Congress must deliver what the American people want.
What they want is border security first. So build the border security wall, end the chain migration, get rid of this crazy visa lottery, do things in a way that make good comments, sanctuary city policy, get rid of those. Do those things first. Then we'll deal with the DACA situation. That is consistent with the mandate of the 2016 election and, frankly, consistent with what the president and what Republicans campaigned on.
The Senate passed a major immigration reform plan back in 2013 with 68 votes in favor, but it did not go anywhere in the House. As the Senate's set to begin this debate, its Democratic leader sounds more anxious about the House side of the Capitol.
I also hope that Speaker Ryan will do what Senator McConnell has agreed to do. Allow a fair and open process to debate a Dreamers bill on the House floor.
There is a March 5th deadline to address the so-called Dreamers. Supporters of getting this done are hopeful that deadline will deliver a result. Harris?
Mike Emanuel, thank you very much. As we come out to the couch now, Congressman, are we closer than we have ever been before or not?
I think time will tell. I think what the Senate is going to do is probably going to be a lot different than what most of the House Republicans are going to want to do.
How different?
Well, I mean, for example, the Good Lad bill, which is kind of the House's version of what we need to do to deal with this. Yes, it ends chain migration. Yes, it does the diversity lottery. It ends that. It also defunds sanctuary cities. It also has E-Verify. And so part of the problem with, go back to the Reagan amnesty, that has incentivized more people to come illegally historically when you do that stuff. If you have E-Verify and you're defunding sanctuary cities, well, what you're doing is you're turning off the incentives to come illegally in the future. And I think that is going to be the difference. Are you doing something that's actually solving the problem going forward, or are you just continuing on this cycle where we're going to be in the same place 10, 15 years in the future?
So, Marie, if you keep the legal immigration levels at where they are for the next decade, which is something that I would imagine Democrats really want. They don't want to dip in that. And you allow any form of amnesty, because that's what the president has said that he would sign as well for the Dreamers. But you have the E-Verify and the things that the congressman is talking about on balance. Do you think Democrats would go for it?
I'm not sure some Republicans in the Senate would go for it. That's going to be a key question. Republicans only have a 1-vote majority in the Senate, and you have some folks who I'm not sure would vote for the Goodlatte bill, just candidly. Mitch McConnell has kept his cards pretty close to his vest in terms of what he actually wants to see in a Senate bill. And I do think this will be a real test for Donald Trump. He has said he wants to fix this. He has put a compromise on the table that I think a lot of Democrats were surprised that he might. Can he bring the House and the Senate Republicans closer to each other? This will be a test of his presidential leadership.
Go back to the president's point in that tweet, though, right, Congressman? He's saying, look, Republicans want to fix to DACA more than Democrats do. Look back at all the opportunities that they had to do something about this, and they were not able to get that done. I mean, is there a lot of truth to that?
Well, I think the reason why they didn't do it when Obama had the 60 votes in the Senate and the House majority is because they know doing some of this is unpopular. I mean, there are a lot of unpopular elements to some of these things. I mean, the Gang of Eight bill, remember, that was a massive increase in unskilled legal immigration in addition to a big amnesty. So if you're looking at some of those states that Trump did well in the Midwest, that is not something that I think a lot of blue-collar folks think is necessarily good for their wages and their jobs. And so that's been the issue.
But DACA is actually pretty popular, right? I mean, DACA is pretty popular, comparatively speaking.
DACA is popular on both sides because people want to protect, oftentimes children who were brought here at very young ages from being deported to countries, they might have come from when they were young, but they don't have homes there anymore. Then there is bipartisan support for that. There are several areas where there is bipartisan support. The president is talking about giving amnesty and citizenship, not just legal protection, which is something that Lindsey Graham and some of his cohorts have been talking about, but citizenship to 1.8 million people here. And that is a huge number. So there are a lot of gray areas, and I think that's why you're seeing this open Senate debate, because it's not as black and white as both sides have framed it for so long. And the debate is getting more sophisticated, and people are realizing that if you have prohibition on legal immigration, you're going to have more illegal immigration. If you have an entitlement state in this country, which makes it really attractive for people to come here and get free benefits, you're going to have more of that kind of, hold on one second, you're going to have more of that kind of illegal immigration. If you end the entitlement state, which Republicans and Democrats are not willing to do, you're going to see a vast shift in immigration in this country, and I think that's ultimately what people want. That system that works better.
Congressman, when you look at somebody like a Lamar Smith who says no way to amnesty, and you look at others in the House and obviously in your party, what is the compromise, intra-party?
Well, Goodlatte's bill is actually a compromise because it provides some type of regularization for people who have DACA. So they will have basically a non-immigrant visa. Now, what it doesn't allow them is to get citizenship and then do the chain migration to bring in the relatives. And so that would be something for those folks because part of the DACA stuff, I mean, they were offered this. I think it was illegal what Obama did. But, I mean, all they did was just sign the forms the government offered them. So I think that provision of that recognizes that reliance interest, but it's doing it in a way that I don't think will fuel future waves. Remember, when Obama instituted DACA, what happened that summer of 2014?
It created
you
so
had a border
much gray
surge.
Area. Absolutely right. I mean, that's one of the gray areas.
But you had people sending unaccompanied minors
exactly. They
across
thought
the
they
border.
could send kids here and they would achieve.
We don't want to incentivize that. And some of those folks were being trafficked. They were being abused. I mean, it was really bad.
Well, even the detention centers on our borders. I mean, we were having a hard time keeping up with that, with these children coming over.
So, Congressman, is it fair to say that there's real progress being made?
I think we'll see what happens in the Senate. At a minimum, whatever the Senate comes up with, that's got to get the president's approval. If the president says this is not the direction he wants to go, then that'll immediately be dead in the House. It's not going to go anywhere.
So what happens if wall funding, though, takes a turn that it did last time around in 2006, and you have eminent domain lawsuits that hold up some of the wall construction?
And that's been the problem with all the immigration debate. The promises of future security or enforcement somehow never materialize. So the wall, you're exactly right, not just authorizing funding, but actually appropriating it. And then you have to override all the other laws for the so that the wall's not held up infinitum. And the same thing with the chain migration. I mean, the president's proposal to do chain migration 10 years from now, there's a question about whether that will actually stick if you do it that far into the future. So Jim Jordan, when you showed him, what Jimmy's saying is, let's get this stuff in place and then do the DACA once it's in place.
How surprised are you that the conversation, though, I mean, if you look at what we just went through to prevent the government from shutting down, started in the Senate, And normally it's the House that kind of leads on these issues. What is so difficult about particularly immigration that keeps it in the Senate's hands first now?
Well, I think that Paul Ryan made a promise when he became Speaker that he would not move immigration that didn't have a majority of Republican votes. And, Goodlatte, I think, probably has that. I don't know whether there's 218 for that or not. But I think that they've not wanted to do anything in the House that's just going to crater in the Senate. So let's see what they get 60 votes for, and then we'll consider it.
Come on, get back in here,
No,
Marie.
I don't think the Goodlatte bill has anywhere close to 218. And I think that and look, there are a lot of Republicans in the House who are not running again, who don't have the same concerns about the base, who don't have the same concerns about being primaried, who look at the Goodlatte bill and say this actually isn't a compromise in the same way that E-Verify it sounds so, not controversial. It's incredibly controversial, and I don't think that can pass in a Senate bill. So unfortunately for Republicans, only having a one-vote majority in the Senate makes this conversation a tough one, and the president needs to make clear what his priorities are.
Okay, so to that point, let me ask you a question. Is it better on immigration to do what they talked about with health care? Because trying to do it in one giant piece didn't work.
All right, I'm going to have to break in with breaking news now. The president is hosting a meeting at the White House on infrastructure. It was supposed to begin that way, and then it ranged into many, many more topics. Let's watch together.
If you want it badly, you're going to get it, and if you don't want it, that's okay with me too. But we have to rebuild our infrastructure. I said this morning, as of a couple of months ago, we have spent $7 trillion in the Middle East. $7 trillion. What a mistake. But it is what it is. This is what I took over. And we're trying to build roads and bridges and fix bridges that are falling down. And we have a hard time getting the money. It's crazy. But think of that. As of a couple of months ago, $7 trillion in the Middle East. And the Middle East is far worse now than it was 17 years ago when they went in. And not so intelligently, I have to say, went in. I'm being nice. So it's a very sad thing. The budget was recently passed. And the reason it was passed is because of our military. Our military was totally depleted. And we will have a military like we've never had before. We're going to have an incredible military. And to me, that means a couple of things. Number one, it does mean jobs. But really, number one, it means safety and security. Because without the military, and we may have very strong views on spending, which I have, but without the military, it's possible there's no reason for us to be meeting. Maybe we wouldn't be here. So we're going to have the strongest military we've ever had by far. We're increasing arsenals of virtually every weapon. We're modernizing and creating a brand new nuclear force. And frankly, we have to do it because others are doing it. If they stop, we'll stop. But they're not stopping. So if they're not going to stop, we're going to be so far ahead of everybody else in nuclear like you've never seen before. And I hope they stop. And if they do, we'll stop in 2 minutes. And frankly, I'd like to get rid of a lot of them. And if they want to do that, we'll go along with them. We won't lead the way. We'll go along with them. But we will have a nuclear force that will be absolutely modernized and brand new. And hopefully we'll never have to use it. And hopefully we can reduce it in the years ahead. And that depends really on what other people are going to be doing. But we will always be number one in that category, certainly as long as I'm president. We're going to be far, far in excess of anybody else. I'm honored to be here with the governors, with county executives and mayors from around the country, Secretary Chao, Secretary Zinke, Secretary Ross, Administrator Pruitt. Thank you for joining us. I greatly appreciate it. We're here today to discuss the critical need to rebuild America's crumbling infrastructure. And one understands, and the people in this room really understand better than most, probably, hopefully better than anybody, that the problem the states have and local leaders have with funding the infrastructure is horrendous. And we will build, we will maintain, and the vast majority of Americans want to see us take care of our infrastructure. Trucking companies are complaining that they used to take trucks from Los Angeles to New York, and there was no damage. Now they bring from Los Angeles to New York, and there's tremendous damage to their trucks because our roads are in bad shape, and we're going to get the roads in great shape. and very important. We're going to make our infrastructure modernized, and we're really way behind schedule. We're way behind other countries. We always led the way for many, many years. Then, a number of decades ago, it slowed down, and over the last 8 years and 15 years, to be honest, it's come to a halt. This morning, I submitted legislative principles to Congress that will spur the biggest and boldest infrastructure investment in American history. The framework will generate an unprecedented $1.5 to $1.7 trillion investment in American infrastructure. We're going to have a lot of public-private, and that way it gets done on time, on budget. It will speed the permit approval process from 10 years to 2 years and maybe even to 1 year. Because when we give you as governors and mayors and people representing your great states, so we give you money and you can't get your approvals, I guess we're going to have to take that money back or you're not going to build. And some of you are sitting around the table that I know, some of the governors, you're going to get those permits, I have no doubt. Others, I see a couple sitting around the table, I don't think they're going to get their permits so fast. But you're going to have to get it, otherwise you're not going to be able to build. Because we can't give you money and you're going to take 15 years to get a permit. In one state, it took 17 years for a basic roadway to get a permit. And the cost was many, many, many times what it was supposed to be. And we can't have that. So we want you to get going, and you'll work on the permitting process. And from a federal standpoint, environmentally and everything we have to do, I see Scott is here. We're going to get you permits very quickly. It provides $50 billion for rural infrastructure, who have really been left out. The rural folks have been left out, including broadband internet access, which they don't have, and they want it, and the farmers want it. It will create thousands and thousands of jobs and increase training for our great American workers. And it returns power to the state and local governments who know best what their people need. Washington will no longer be a roadblock to progress. Washington will now be your partner. Will be your partner. A lot of money, up to $1.7 trillion. That's bigger than people thought. And we're going to have a lot of great people working. We're going to also have great companies investing and building, and they'll build for you, because sometimes the states aren't able to do it like we can do it, or like other people can do it, or like I used to do it. When I did the Wallman Rink, it was 7 years. They couldn't get it built. It would have been forever. They couldn't get it built. And I did it in a few months at a much smaller price. They had invested $12 million in building an ice skating rink in the middle of Central Park. Somebody told me about this the other day. They've never forgotten it. It was a big deal at the time. It remains a big deal. Took many, many years, and they were unable to open it. And I said, you know, I'd like to be able to have my daughter Ivanka, who is with us, I'd like to be able to have her go ice skating sometime before she doesn't want to ice skate. And I got involved, and I did it in a few months, and we did it for a tiny fraction of the cost. And it's really no different with a roadway. It's no different with a bridge or tunnel or any of the things that we'll be fixing. The returns of money and investment to the states and local government will be incredible. And nobody knows better than you people where you want the money invested. That's the other thing. For the federal government to say, gee, this is what we want you to do in Wisconsin, Scott, you know exactly where you want to do it, and you've done a great job, by the way, but you know exactly where that money is going. And how is your new company that's opening up there doing, by the way? Are they doing okay? That was a big one. Foxconn is moving along, right? They make the Apple iPhone, and I said for a long time, I said I want those companies to be making their product here, and they went to Wisconsin. Scott did a fantastic job of presentation. I actually saw a site that I loved. I said that was an old auto site. And I was with the head of Foxconn, great man, actually, great businessman, incredible. And I said, that's a great site for you, right in Wisconsin, and I hear that's where they're going. So you've done a fantastic job. But this is a common sense and bipartisan plan that every member of Congress should support. I look forward to working with them, and we're going to get the American people roads that are fixed and bridges that are fixed. And if for any reason they don't want to support it, hey, that's going to be up to them. What was very important to me was the military. What was very important to me was the tax cuts. And what was very important to me was regulation. This is of great importance, but it's not nearly in that category because the states will have to do it themselves if we don't do it. But I would like to help the states out, and we're doing that with a very big investment. One of the other things I think so important to mention is that in the budget, we took care of the military like it's never been taken care of before. In fact, General Mattis called me. He goes, wow, I can't believe I got everything we wanted. I said, that's right, but we want no excuses. We want you to buy twice, okay? Twice what you thought for half the price. So maybe we're going to get involved a little bit in the buying. We want to get twice as many planes for half the price. And believe me, we can do a lot because the procurement process is very outdated, to put it nicely. But we're going to have something very special. But one of the things that was very important to me with respect to the budget was DACA. I did not want DACA in the budget. I wanted DACA separate so that we could talk about it and make a deal. And I hope to be able to make a deal. I hope the Democrats are not going to use it just as a campaign. You know, they've been talking about DACA for many years, and they haven't produced. We started talking about DACA, and I think we'll produce. But if the Democrats want to make a deal, it's really up to them. Because we want really tremendous border security, but we have to have Democrat support for DACA, and they are starting that process today. We didn't want to have it in the big budget, because if we have it in the big budget, it's going to get mixed up with all of the other things. So now we have our military taken care of, and now we start very serious DACA talks today. And we are, I can tell you, speaking for the Republican Party, we would love to do DACA. We would love to get it done. We want border security and the other elements that you know about, chain migration, you know about, the visa lottery, you know about. But we think there's a good chance of getting DACA done if the Democrats are serious and they actually want to do it. But they didn't want tax cuts. They fought. We didn't get one vote for massive tax cuts that have turned out to be unbelievably popular. And what came up, which was even a surprise to us, were the big companies stepped up. And millions of people have gotten tremendous bonuses. Nobody knew that was going to happen. That was just the beginning point. So we didn't get one Democrat vote, not one, for the biggest tax. And I think that's a big political problem for them, you know, if you want to know the truth. They are going around saying they made a mistake because the tax cuts have now, you see what's going on. It's spurred the economy. Unemployment is at virtually record lows. Black unemployment is at the lowest level in history. Hispanic unemployment is at the lowest level in recorded history, which is really something that's so great. And we are it's amazing what's been going on with the economy. And I just want to end by saying it's an honor to have all of you with us. We're going to have a few of you make statements, and then we'll all stay around. If you want, we can leave the press, or we can have the press leave immediately. I'll leave that up to Scott Walker, because you're going to be the first speaker. So, Scott, do you want to say a few words?
Sure.
And thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Well, first off, Mr. President, I think on behalf of all of us, all the state and local leaders, both Republican and Democrat alike, thank you to you and your administration for hosting us all today. Before you came in, we were having a good and lively discussion about answering some of the questions many of us had. You alluded to a moment ago Foxconn, which you were great to help us announce here. As I mentioned to many of the folks assembled here today, for the first time ever, LCD panels, the kind of panels here, in the future they'll be even bigger, made by Sharp, will be made in the United States, and we're proud that they'll be made in the state of Wisconsin. About a $10 billion investment. We're helping with about $3 billion worth of incentives. And when we think about infrastructure, it ties into that, as it does all over the state of Wisconsin. In the last few years, through this recent budget, we've made about a $24 billion investment in our state into transportation infrastructure. That's about $3 billion more than the previous 8 years. And so we understand what you're trying to do here. But one of those projects that will help there is it's about a $1.5, almost $1.6 billion transportation project, Interstate 94, from the state line through Kenosha, Racine counties, all the way up to our largest county, Milwaukee County. We've completed a good chunk of it. I think 13 of the 19 interchanges have been completed. About half of the miles have been done. But there's one major portion right by where they're going to build this new $10 billion ecosystem that we're still working on. The state, most recently in our budget, put about $250 million on top of all the money that's been spent up until now. And we think through the help of the federal government with the Infrastructure for America funding that we can finish off the rest. And get this, the good part is The local roads that we're helping out with an additional money on beyond that's being done in about 8 months' time, and we believe on the time schedule we're on, the remainder of that can be done in less than 2 years, with the ideal completion date being before the fall of 2020, a date I'm sure you're interested in. That would be completed by that time, and we're thrilled, and we think it's a good example of a good partnership between the federal, the state, and local governments. And I just would add, when you were coming in, my friend from Iowa was just talking about rural infrastructure and rural interest, and I also want to say, because we've got a good portion of our state that is rural as well, not only thank you on a rural initiative for transportation, but particularly for broadband. We'd love to have, whether it's white spaces, fiber networks, you name it, there's plenty of opportunities for us to grow and expand our internet capacities all throughout the United States.
Well, it's been very unfair what's happened with broadband in terms of the Middle West and in terms really of rural areas, as you know, and you sort of were a victim of it too, but now it's going to be taken